Oran had lived for 300 years. He had watched empires rise and fall. He had seen species discover fire and species forget how to dream. In all that time, across all those worlds, he had never encountered anything quite like humanity. He stood in the observation deck of the Nexus Chamber, the great meeting place of the Ascended Collective. 47 elder species had built this station over 12,000 years. They had ended wars, prevented genocides, and guided younger races toward what they called proper civilization. Oran had served as a diplomatic observer for most of his life. He believed in the collective's mission. He believed they knew what was best. Then the humans arrived. It happened 30 years ago, though Oran remembered it like yesterday. A small fleet of crewed vessels had appeared at the edge of collective space. The ships were ugly things, built from metal and hope and not much else. The collective sensors had trouble understanding them at first. No species had ever traveled between stars using such primitive technology. The engines should not have worked. The life support should have failed. The humans should have died 1,000 times before reaching anyone. But they did not die. They never seemed to die when they should. Oran had been part of the welcoming committee. He remembered watching the first humans step onto the station. They were soft creatures, with no natural armor, no claws, no venom. Their eyes sat on the front of their faces like prey animals. Their bodies broke easily. A fall that would barely scratch a collective member could kill a human. And yet they walked onto that station like they owned it. The leader of their group was a woman named. She had gray in her hair and lines on her face. Oran later learned that humans aged visibly, that their bodies broke down over mere decades. It seemed cruel. It seemed wasteful. Did not seem to mind. She smiled at the assembled representatives of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, and she said words that Oran would never forget. "We come in peace, but we also come ready. Show us friendship and we will show you wonders. Show us hostility and you will learn why we survived our planet." The collective had laughed quietly among themselves. What could these fragile creatures possibly do against civilizations that had mastered space travel when humanity was still learning to plant seeds? The elder species had faced countless younger races. They knew how to handle them. They knew how to manage them. So the collective welcomed humanity with open arms and closed minds. They gave humans a small region of space to call their own. They shared technology, but only certain kinds. Nothing too dangerous. Nothing too powerful. They invited human representatives to minor councils but kept them away from real decisions. They watched and waited for humanity to mature, to calm down, to become civilized. 30 years passed. Humanity did not calm down. Oran had studied them extensively. He had visited their worlds and walked their cities. He had eaten their food and listened to their music. Each experience left him more confused than the last. Humans were impossible contradictions. They built hospitals and weapons factories on the same streets. They wept at sad stories but cheered at violent sports. They kept animals as family members, feeding and caring for creatures that served no practical purpose. They created art that served no function except to make other humans feel things. They launched themselves into the void of space in vessels barely stronger than paper, and they called it adventure. They also remembered everything. Every wrong ever done to them, every slight, every betrayal. They wrote it down. They taught it to their children. They built monuments to their dead and swore oaths that lasted generations. Oran found this disturbing. His own people let go of the past. They moved forward. Humans dragged their history behind them like chains they refused to remove. 5 years ago, Oran had met Ambassador. She had been assigned to the Nexus Chamber as humanity's primary representative. She was younger than had been, with dark hair and darker eyes. She had a habit that Oran found deeply unsettling. She looked directly at people when she spoke to them. Not past them, not through them, but at them. Like she was trying to see something hidden inside. Their first conversation had been about nothing important: trade routes, cultural exchanges, minor diplomatic matters. but had asked him questions no other species representative had ever asked. She wanted to know about his home world. She wanted to know about his family. She wanted to know what made him happy. Oran had not known how to answer. Happiness was not something his people discussed. It was not relevant to their function. Had laughed at his confusion, not a mocking laugh but something warm and strange. "You know," she said, "where I come from we have a saying, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy." Oran had no idea who Jack was or why his entertainment schedule mattered, but he found himself thinking about the conversation for days afterward. He found himself looking forward to seeing again. He found himself wondering what it would be like to feel happiness the way humans seem to feel it, so openly, so carelessly, like they had an unlimited supply. He also found himself worrying about her. The collective's inner council had been discussing humanity with increasing concern. The humans were expanding too fast. They were asking too many questions. They were building things without permission, modifying technology in ways that had not been approved. Some council members wanted stricter controls. Some wanted to limit human population growth. Some whispered about more permanent solutions. Oran never told about these discussions. It was not his place. The collective knew what was best. Then 3 days ago, everything changed. Oran was in his quarters when the alert came. A massive fleet had emerged from dark space, from a region the collective had believed was empty. The ships belonged to the Dominion, a species that had been defeated and contained centuries ago. Somehow, in the darkness between stars, they had rebuilt. They had grown. They had been waiting. And their first target was a human colony world called New Melbourne. Oran rushed to the observation center. Other collective members were already there, watching the sensor feeds with expressions of concern and calculation. New Melbourne was a young colony, barely 50 years old. It had 4.2 million inhabitants. It had farms and schools and hospitals. It had families and children and dreams. It had no military presence. The collective had assured humanity that they were protected. There was no need for weapons. There was no need for warships. The elder species would keep them safe. The fleet numbered over 1,000 vessels. They moved toward New Melbourne like a swarm of hungry insects. The colonists sent desperate messages, begging for help, begging for anyone to come. The collective debated. They calculated. They discussed options and risks and strategic implications. And Oran watched the first ships enter New Melbourne's atmosphere. He watched the bombardment begin. He watched cities start to burn. He thought about, somewhere on the station, probably watching the same feeds. He thought about her warm laugh and her direct gaze and her strange questions about happiness. He wondered if humans would still be capable of happiness after today. He wondered if anyone would. The death toll climbed. 100,000, 200,000. The numbers kept rising and the collective kept debating, and Oran stood frozen at the observation screen, watching a world die while the civilizations in the galaxy argued about what to do. He did not know it yet, but his entire understanding of the universe was about to break. And humanity was about to show the galaxy something it had never seen before. The screens showed hell. Oran stood among dozens of collective observers watching New Melbourne burn. They were not conquerors, they were destroyers. Their ships rained fire on cities that had never known war. Their ground forces moved through streets filled with screaming civilians. They did not take prisoners. They did not accept surrender. They simply killed. The observation center was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the distant sound of transmissions from the dying world. Collective members watched with the calm detachment of scientists studying an experiment. Some took notes. Some discussed tactical observations. One elderly diplomat complained that the destruction was disrupting a trade negotiation he had been planning. Oran wanted to scream at them. He wanted to ask them how they could be so calm while millions died. But he stayed silent. He was an observer. That was his function. he observed. The death toll passed 500,000. A transmission broke through the chaos. A human woman appeared on the main screen. Her face was covered in blood and ash. Behind her, buildings collapsed and fires raged. She held a small child in her arms, a boy who could not have been more than 4 years old. The child was crying. The woman was not. She looked directly at the camera, directly at anyone who might be watching across the galaxy. Her voice was steady despite the destruction around her. "My name is Sarah," she said. "I am a teacher. I taught history to children who will never grow up now. I taught them about Earth, about the wars we survived, about the peace we built. I taught them that the galaxy was full of wise and ancient peoples who would protect us." She paused. A soldier appeared in the background. She did not turn around. "I was wrong," she continued. "No one is coming to save us. We sent messages. We begged for help. The collective told us to remain calm. They told us they were discussing options." The soldier raised his weapon. "Remember us," Sarah said. "Remember what they did. Remember who did nothing to stop it and make them pay." The transmission ended. Oran felt something break inside him. He did not know what it was. His people did not have words for this feeling, but he knew that he would see Sarah's face for the rest of his life. He would hear her voice in his dreams. He would wonder about the child she held, about whether they had survived, knowing in his heart that they had not. The death toll passed 1 million. The collective's High Council convened an emergency session. Oran was permitted to attend as an observer. He stood in the shadows of the Great Chamber and watched the most powerful beings in the galaxy debate what to do about the massacre happening in real time. The High Arbiter, an ancient being of crystal and light, spoke first. "The action is unfortunate but not unexpected. They were always a volatile species. We contained them once. We shall contain them again in time." "What about the humans?" another council member asked. "They are demanding immediate military intervention." "The humans must learn patience," the Arbiter replied. "Intervention would destabilize our relationship with the remnant factions. It would send the wrong message to other species considering aggression. The strategic calculations are clear. We must allow this situation to resolve naturally." "Naturally?" Oran spoke without meaning to. Every eye in the chamber turned to him. He had violated protocol. Observers did not speak, but he could not stop himself. "Millions are dying. Children are dying. How is that natural?" The Arbiter regarded him with something like pity. "Young one, you do not yet understand the weight of galactic governance. Sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater peace. The humans will be compensated. They will receive new territory, new resources. In time, they will understand." Oran wanted to argue. He wanted to scream. But the chamber doors opened and Ambassador walked in. She was alone. No guards, no aides, no other diplomats. She wore simple clothes, not her formal uniform. Her face was calm, but her eyes were different. Oran had seen many things in those eyes over the years: warmth, curiosity, humor. Now he saw something else, something that made his blood run cold. Walked to the center of the chamber. She did not bow. She did not follow protocol. She simply stood there, looking at the assembled leaders of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. "I have one question," she said. Her voice was soft. It carried easily in the silent chamber. "You knew they were mobilizing. Your sensors detected their fleet 3 weeks ago. You had time to warn us. You had time to send ships. You chose not to. Why?" The Arbiter straightened, light rippling through his crystalline form. "The Council determined that alerting the humans would have caused panic and potentially provoked." "Why?" repeated. A long pause. Then the Arbiter spoke again, more slowly this time. "Because we calculated that aggression would naturally limit human expansion. Because your species was growing too quickly, asking too many questions, becoming difficult to manage. Because the loss of one colony world was determined to be an acceptable cost for long-term galactic stability." The chamber was completely silent. Nodded slowly. The calm on her face did not change. That terrified Oran more than any display of anger could have. "I understand perfectly," she said. "Thank you for clarifying where we stand." She turned and walked out of the chamber. She did not look back. Within hours, every human diplomat in the galaxy had departed their posts. Every human ship had left collective space. Every communication channel went silent. The humans retreated to their own territory and closed their borders. The death toll on New Melbourne reached 3.8 million before the finale. Only 400,000 humans survived, most of them evacuated in the final hours by civilian ships that flew into the killing zone against impossible odds. The collective waited for the humans to return to negotiations. They prepared generous compensation packages. They drafted sincere-sounding apologies. They expected anger, yes, but also acceptance. Every other species had eventually accepted collective decisions. Every other species had learned their place. 3 days passed, silence. Then, on the 4th day, a transmission was broadcast on every frequency across the galaxy. It reached collective stations and warships and independent traders and every inhabited world within range. The message was simple. It was delivered by a human woman Oran did not recognize, wearing a military uniform he had never seen before. "To the Dominion," the woman said, "you have 60 hours to surrender unconditionally. Every ship, every weapon, every leader involved in the attack on New Melbourne will be handed over to human custody. There will be no negotiation. There will be no discussion. There will be no second warning." She paused. "You killed 4 million of our people, our children, our families, our friends. You did this while the galaxy watched and did nothing. So now we are going to do something. And when we are finished with you, we are going to have a conversation with everyone who stood by while our world burned." The transmission ended. The collective laughed. They laughed louder. The humans had a small defense fleet. They had no military tradition. They had been under collective protection their entire history. What could they possibly do against the Dominion's thousands of warships? Oran did not laugh. He remembered Sarah's face. He remembered eyes. He remembered every story he had ever heard about human history, about the wars they had fought among themselves, about what they became when pushed too far. He looked out at the stars, toward human space, and he felt something he had never felt before in 300 years of life. Fear. The 60 hours passed. They did not surrender. They sent back a response filled with mockery and threats. They promised to do to Earth what they had done to New Melbourne. They called humans insects, vermin, prey animals pretending to be predators. Then the humans showed them what prey animals could become. Oran was in the observation center when the first reports came in. He had barely slept in days. He could not stop thinking about what was coming. He expected to see humanity's small fleet crushed within hours. He expected to watch another massacre. What he saw instead broke his mind. Ships were launching from human space. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. They poured out from every human world like blood from a wound. They came in every shape and size. Warships, yes, but also cargo freighters and passenger liners and mining vessels and research stations. Anything that could fly, anything that could carry weapons. The collective sensors struggled to count them all. 200,000 vessels, all of them heading toward space. "That is impossible," a collective analyst said, his voice shaking. 3 days ago, the humans had fewer than 500 military ships. This would require them to convert their entire civilian fleet, every transport, every shuttle, every vessel capable of space travel. "Not just convert," another analyst added. "They would have to arm them, build weapons from nothing, install targeting systems, train crews. The industrial output required would take any other species decades." "How long did it take the humans?" someone asked. The analyst checked his readings 3 times before answering. 72 hours. Oran stared at the screen. He tried to understand what he was seeing. He failed. Reports flooded in from human space. Every factory on every human world was running without pause. Workers operated in shifts that never ended. When one person collapsed from exhaustion, another took their place within minutes. Engineers worked until their hands bled, then wrapped them and kept working. Scientists lived in their laboratories, sleeping on floors when they slept at all. Some did not sleep. Some worked until their hearts stopped and they died at their stations. And the volunteers, millions of them. Humans lined up outside recruitment centers that had not existed a week ago. They signed up for military service knowing they would likely die. They signed up anyway. Grandparents and teenagers, teachers and farmers, artists and accountants, anyone who could hold a weapon, fly a ship, or push a button. The collective calculated that 94% of humanity's adult population had mobilized for the war effort. 94%. No species in galactic history had ever achieved more than 30% mobilization, and those efforts had taken years to organize. The humans had done it in 3 days. Oran needed to understand. He needed to know how this was possible. He contacted a human engineer he had befriended years ago. Was a cheerful man who loved a game called baseball. He had spent hours trying to explain it to Oran, laughing at the alien's confusion. They had shared meals together. They had discussed philosophy and music and the nature of existence. Appeared on the screen. Oran barely recognized him. The cheerful man was gone. Looked like he had aged 20 years in a week. His eyes were hollow. His face was gray. His hands were wrapped in bandages stained with blood and burn marks. Behind him, Oran could see the inside of a factory, filled with smoke and noise and people working at a desperate pace. Oran said, "What is happening? How are you doing this?" Laughed. It was not the warm laugh Oran remembered. It was something else, something that made his heart ache. "You don't understand," said. "You never understood us. You watched us and studied us and you thought you knew what we were. You were wrong." "Then help me understand," Oran pleaded. Leaned closer to the camera. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but something burned behind them, something ancient and terrible. "You think we're angry," he said. "We're not angry. Anger fades. Anger burns out. This is something else. This is what humans become when you hurt the people we love." He paused. Somewhere behind him, a machine screamed and sparks flew. "We watched them kill our children," continued. "We watched our families burn while the galaxy did nothing. We couldn't stop it. We couldn't save them. Do you know what that does to a human? Do you know what it feels like to be helpless while everything you love dies?" Oran did not answer. He did not know. "It breaks something inside us," said, "and what grows in the broken place? It's not anger, it's not hate, it's something colder, something patient, something that doesn't stop until the universe is balanced again." "What is it called?" Oran asked. Smiled. It was the most terrifying expression Oran had ever seen on a human face. "We call it fury." The transmission ended. Oran watched the human fleet enter space. 200,000 ships held together with salvage and determination, and something beyond any collective analysis. The fleet moved to intercept them. The enemy had superior technology, superior weapons, superior numbers. They had been conquering worlds when humans were still living in caves. The first battle lasted 6 hours. The humans won. They did not win because their ships were better. They did not win because their weapons were stronger. They won because they refused to stop. Ships destroyed human vessels, and the dying crews used their last moments to ram their burning hulks into enemy engines. Human fighters flew into defensive screens that should have killed them instantly, absorbing fire so that bombers could get through. Captains ordered ramming speed when their weapons failed, turning their ships into missiles. The commander sent a desperate message to his fleet. They do not retreat, they do not surrender, they do not stop. He was killed 3 minutes later when a human freighter, its weapons destroyed and its hull on fire, crashed directly into his bridge. More reports came in, more battles, more human victories that should have been defeats. The collective watched in silence as the Dominion's outer defenses crumbled, then the middle defenses, then the inner ring. The humans lost thousands of ships. They lost tens of thousands of people. They did not slow down. Every loss seemed to make them fight harder. Every death added fuel to the fire that burned inside them. Orion received a final report on the 7th day of the war. The human fleet had reached They were outnumbered 3-1. Their ships were damaged and exhausted. Any other species would have stopped to regroup, to recover, to negotiate. The humans attacked immediately. The Battle of Prime lasted 11 hours. When it was over, the fleet was debris floating in space. Their orbital defenses were dust. Their cities were burning. The Supreme Commander sent a surrender request. The human admiral who received it was a woman named Stone. Before the war, she had been a school teacher. She had taught literature to teenage students on a colony world far from the fighting. When New Melbourne fell, she had signed up for military service. 3 weeks later, she commanded humanity's largest battle group. She looked at the surrender request for a long time. Then she sent a response. New Melbourne did not get to surrender, neither do you. Orion closed his eyes. He thought about in her warm laugh. He thought about in his baseball stories. He thought about Sarah and her child dying while the galaxy watched. He thought about what those gentle, curious, impossible creatures had become. And for the first time in his long life, Orion wept. 6 months. That was how long it took humanity to destroy an empire. The Dominion had existed for 8,000 years. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They had enslaved billions of beings. They had built a civilization that stretched across an entire arm of the galaxy. They had technology that most species could not even understand. They had believed themselves invincible. The humans proved them wrong. Orion spent those 6 months compiling reports. It was his function, after all. He was an observer, but what he observed shattered everything he thought he knew about war, about civilization, about the nature of intelligent life. They should have won. Every calculation, every simulation, every analysis said the same thing. The humans were outnumbered. Their technology was inferior. Their military experience was limited to small conflicts among themselves. They had no chance. But the humans did not fight like any species the galaxy had ever seen. They adapted. Every time they used a new tactic, the humans countered it within days. Their scientists worked without rest, studying captured technology and finding weaknesses. Their commanders changed strategies mid-battle, responding to situations faster than they could react. They learned from every defeat and used that knowledge to achieve victory the next time. They sacrificed. Human soldiers held positions that were impossible to hold. They fought without food, without water, without ammunition. When their weapons failed, they used rocks. When their rocks ran out, they used their hands. Reports came in of human soldiers biting warriors, tearing at them with teeth and nails when everything else was gone. They refused to quit. Orion read a report about a human pilot whose ship was destroyed during a battle. She ejected in a survival pod and drifted for 3 days before being rescued. When she reached a human station, she immediately requested a new ship. When asked about her injuries, she said she would sleep after the war was over. She flew 17 more missions before she was killed. Her final act was to crash her damaged fighter into a carrier's engine, destroying the ship and saving 3 human transports that were evacuating wounded soldiers. She was 23 years old. The reports kept coming. Each one was worse than the last. A human ground force held a mining colony for 18 days against overwhelming numbers. When reinforcements finally arrived, only 37 humans were still alive out of an original force of 2,000. They had killed 8,000 soldiers. The last survivors were still fighting when the rescue ships landed. A human scientist worked for 72 hours straight to crack the encryption on a captured communication system. She succeeded, giving human commanders access to enemy battle plans. She died of heart failure 20 minutes later. She was found at her desk, her hand still on her keyboard. A group of human civilians on an occupied world formed a resistance movement. They had no military training, no weapons, no support. They sabotaged equipment using tools from their kitchens. They hid refugees in their basements. They sent intelligence reports using children as messengers. When they discovered them, they fought back with farming equipment and kitchen knives. 200 civilians held off a battalion for 9 hours until human soldiers arrived. The collective watched all of this. They analyzed it. They discussed it. They tried to understand how a species so young, so fragile, so emotional could do what the humans were doing. They could not understand. Their minds were not built for it. Orion received a transmission from a commander 3 months into the war. The commander was old, one of the highest-ranking officers in the Dominion. His name was Al. He had conquered worlds. He had led fleets to victory. He had believed he understood war. The transmission was meant for his family, a final message before his ship was destroyed. Somehow, collective sensors intercepted it. Al's voice was shaking. Orion had never heard a sound afraid before. "They do not stop," Al said. "We kill them by the thousands and they do not stop. We destroy their ships and they crash the wreckage into us. We capture their soldiers and they keep fighting from inside their cells. We offer them mercy and they laugh at us." He paused. In the background, Orion could hear alarms and explosions. "They are laughing," Al continued. "Even now as they die they are laughing. I do not understand. I have fought 100 species. I have never seen anything like this. They are not warriors, they are something else. Something my people should never have awakened." The transmission ended. Al's flagship was destroyed 20 minutes later by a human attack group. There were no survivors. The war reached its peak at the Battle of Prime. The humans had pushed through every defense, destroyed every fleet, conquered every world between their territory and the enemy. Now they stood at the gates of the Dominion's heart. They gathered everything they had left: 3,000 warships, 2 million soldiers, every weapon, every resource, every being that could fight. They formed a defensive line around there and waited for the human attack. The human fleet that arrived numbered only 1,000 ships. They had lost 2/3 of their forces in the long march through space. Their ships were damaged, patched together with salvage and prayers. Their crews were exhausted. They attacked anyway. The battle lasted 11 hours. It was the largest space engagement in galactic history. Debris fields stretched across millions of kilometers. Ships burned like stars being born and dying in the same moment. The humans won. When it was over, the Supreme Commander sent a surrender request. Admiral Stone, the schoolteacher who had become a legend, refused it. She broadcast a message to every on the planet below. "Your leaders ordered the death of 4 million innocent people," she said. "They burned our cities. They killed our children. They did this believing there would be no consequences. They were wrong." She paused. "We do not accept your surrender. We do not want your territory. We do not want your resources. We want justice. Every leader who ordered the attack on New Melbourne will be handed over to human custody. Every soldier who participated will face trial. Your military will be disbanded. Your weapons will be destroyed. This is not negotiable." They had no choice. They agreed. Over the following weeks, humans landed on every world. They arrested military leaders. They dismantled weapons factories. They freed slaves and prisoners. They did not kill civilians. They did not burn cities. They were not conquerors. But they were not merciful either. Every leader responsible for New Melbourne was tried in human courts. The trials were broadcast across the galaxy. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdicts were unanimous. Oran watched the executions. He felt sick, but he could not look away. When it was over, the Dominion no longer existed. 200 billion people scattered across the galaxy as refugees. Their worlds were left intact but empty of military power. Their history was preserved, but their future was uncertain. And the human fleet, what remained of it, turned toward collective space. Oran received a message from. It was the first communication from any human since the war began. "We're coming to talk," she said. Her voice was tired, her eyes were sad. "Not to fight, we don't want to fight anymore, but we are going to have a conversation about what happened, and things are going to change." Oran looked at the approaching human fleet on his sensors. They were smaller now, broken and battered, but they had just destroyed an empire in 6 months. The collective began preparing their defenses. Oran was not sure it would matter. The human fleet arrived at the Nexus Chamber exactly 1 year after the fall of New Melbourne. Oran stood in the observation deck and watched them approach. Behind him, the entire collective leadership had assembled. 47 species, thousands of representatives, the combined wisdom and power of 12,000 years of civilization. They were terrified. The collective had spent weeks preparing for this moment. They had assembled their combined military forces, activated defense systems that had not been used in centuries, drafted surrender terms and alliance proposals, and a dozen other documents. They had analyzed human behavior, studied their tactics, tried to predict what they would do next. All their preparations were useless. Ambassador entered the chamber alone. No guards, no weapons, no fleet of soldiers at her back, just one human woman walking into a room full of beings who had betrayed her people. She looked different from the last time Oran had seen her, older, tired. There were lines on her face that had not been there before. Her hair had more gray in it, but her eyes were the same, that direct gaze that seemed to look straight through everything. Oran had feared what he might see in those eyes. Anger, hate, the cold fury that had destroyed the. Instead, he saw something he did not expect. Sadness, deep, heavy sadness. Walked to the center of the chamber. The assembled representatives watched her in silence. Some stood ready to flee. Others kept their hands near weapons. The High Arbiter's crystalline form flickered nervously. Stopped. She looked around the room slowly, taking in every face, every species, every representative of the civilizations that had watched her people die. Then she spoke. "You're afraid of us now," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the chamber. "I can see it. I can smell it. A year ago you thought of us as children, emotional, unstable, primitive. You thought you needed to manage us, control us, keep us in our place. Now you've seen what we can do and you're terrified." She paused. "Good, you should be. What you saw was real. The fury that destroyed that power exists in every human being. We carry it inside us like fire. When you hurt the people we love, when you threaten our families and our homes and everything we care about, that fire ignites, and nothing in this galaxy can stop it." The chamber was completely silent. Oran found himself holding his breath. "But here's what you don't understand," continued. "That fury is not who we are. It's not what we want to be. It's what we become when we have no other choice. Every human who died in that war, every human who killed in that war, we carry them now. We carry their weight. We will carry it forever." Her voice cracked slightly. She paused, took a breath, and continued. "We don't celebrate what we did. We mourn it. We look at our hands and we see blood that will never wash off. We close our eyes and we see the faces of everyone we killed. Not just the leaders and soldiers who deserved it, but all the others. The civilians caught in our path. The children who never asked for any of this. We did terrible things. Necessary things, maybe, but terrible." She stepped closer to the High Arbiter. "You let our people die because you thought we were too dangerous to let grow. You calculated that sacrificing one colony world would keep us small and manageable. You were right about one thing. We are dangerous. You were wrong about everything else." The Arbiter's light flickered. "What do you want from us?" Smiled. It was a tired smile, without joy but without anger either. "I want you to understand something. We didn't come here to conquer you. We didn't come here for revenge. We have had enough of war. We have had enough of death. Our people are broken and grieving and exhausted. We need to heal. We need to rebuild. We need to remember how to laugh again." She turned to face the entire chamber. "But we will not heal in a galaxy where we are treated like dangerous animals to be contained. We will not rebuild under the shadow of species who see our deaths as acceptable losses. We will not live as second-class citizens, forever managed and controlled by powers who fear what we might become." Her voice grew stronger. "So here is what is going to happen. You will give us a seat on every major council. You will end your containment policies. You will treat us as equals, not as children to be managed. In exchange, we will help you build something better. We will share what we have learned. We will stand beside you against threats like the. We will be your allies, your partners, your friends." She paused. "But we will never again be your victims. We will never again watch our people die while the galaxy debates acceptable losses. If that choice ever comes again, if we are ever forced to become what we became in this war, the consequences will be far worse than what you have already seen." The chamber erupted in whispered conversations. The collective representatives debated among themselves, their voices a mixture of fear and uncertainty and something else, something that might have been the beginning of respect. Oran stepped forward. He did not know why. It was not his place, but he could not stay silent any longer. "Ambassador," he said, his voice was shaking, "I watched your world burn. I stood in this chamber and said nothing while the council decided to let your people die. I was a coward. I was wrong. I am sorry." Looked at him. For a long moment she did not speak. Then she nodded slowly. "I know," she said. "Please, we've known each other too long for titles." Oran felt something loosen in his chest. What happens now? She looked out the great windows of the chamber, at the stars beyond. "Now we try something new," she said. "We build a galaxy where no species is managed or contained, where no child dies because some council decided their life was an acceptable cost, where beings like you and beings like me can talk and learn from each other without fear." Is such a thing possible? Turned back to him. There was something in her eyes now, something beyond the sadness and exhaustion. It looked like hope. "I don't know," she said, "but we're going to try because that's what humans do. We break and we hurt and we make terrible mistakes, but we keep trying, we keep hopping, we keep building even when everything tells us to give up." The collective's vote came 3 days later. It was unanimous. Humanity would have full representation on all major councils. The containment policies would end. A new era of cooperation would begin. Oran watched the human delegation sign the treaty, stood among them, her tired face finally showing a small smile. Around her, human diplomats and military officers and scientists stood together. They looked exhausted. They looked haunted, but they also looked determined. Later, when the ceremonies were over and the crowds had dispersed, Oran found alone on an observation deck. She was staring out at the stars, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. "I witnessed your species unleash its fury," he said. "It broke my entire understanding of civilization, of war, of everything I thought I knew." Did not turn around, and now. Oran moved to stand beside her. "Now I am building something new from the broken pieces. I am learning that strength is not about suppressing emotion, but about choosing what to do with it. I am learning that the most dangerous beings in the galaxy are also capable of the greatest compassion." Finally looked at him. Her eyes were wet with tears she would not let fall. "We are monsters," she said quietly. "What we did to what we became during that war, we are capable of terrible things." Oran placed a hand on her shoulder. It was a human gesture he had learned years ago. It felt right. "You are capable of terrible things," he agreed. "But you are also capable of building hospitals and keeping pets and weeping at music. You are capable of signing treaties instead of demanding surrender. You are capable of standing here, grieving for your enemies even as you mourn your own dead." He looked out at the stars. "That is what I have learned from humanity. You contain everything: the fury and the compassion, the monster and the builder, the destroyer and the healer. And somehow, despite all the darkness inside you, you keep choosing to reach for the light." Was quiet for a long moment. Then she laughed softly. It was a broken sound, but there was something in it that Oran recognized. Hope, the beginning of healing. "You know," she said, "for an ancient alien observer, you're pretty wise." Oran smiled. It was a human gesture he had learned to make. It felt right. "I learned from the best," he said. They stood together in silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, human worlds were rebuilding. Refugees were finding new homes. The galaxy was changing, slowly, painfully, but changing. And Oran, for the first time in 300 years, felt something that his people had no word for. The humans called it hope.